In fact, Josh was just asking me, he goes, how are we cool enough to get you to come on the podcast with us? Like, what in the world did you say to him? I'm like, did he think? I feel like Josh thought I was maybe like, hey, I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you a couple $100. We'll throw some women your way. But I'm like, no, I literally just, I found you a while ago, and a lot of your posts made a lot of sense for what myself and some of the other athletes on my team have been going through. So we're really honored that you would, one, take some time out of Mother's Day morning, but also, two, that you would join us, because we are a bit of a startup cast.
Yeah, absolutely.
No,
we appreciate it.
I love podcasts. This is like so fun.
The Coaches Collaboration Podcast.
Hey, this is Josh Pearson.
Performance specialist with the Complete Athlete.
This is Cole Warm.
Certified USAPL club coach and owner of Salutum Health and Performance. Each week, Cole and Josh will take you through training techniques and tips, talk to athletes and fitness professionals to educate and motivate you for your fitness goals. Plus, you'll follow the journeys of Team Salutum Powerlifting and Get Complete Athletes. The Coaches Collaboration Podcast is brought to you by The Complete Athlete, providing world-class continuing education for fitness trainers, coaches, and gyms. Specializing in Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, strongman, barbell and hip classes, personal programming, specialty clinics, competitions, strength and conditioning. Get Complete. Isn't it time to take your coaching to the next level? Using continuing education with research and evidence-based info, and offering specialty services from a team of certified coaches online and on-site. It's time to Get Complete. The Complete Athlete, online at getcomplete.net. And now, the Coaches Collaboration Podcast.
The first question I have is, what do you want us to call you? Do you
Yeah.
want us to call you
Oh, you
Dr.
can just call me
Jacob?
Jake.
All
Okay,
right,
cool.
All right,
All
Jake.
I was going to call
Don't
you
wanna-
J-Dog, but it's
J-Dog.
cool.
Oh, sorry. No, so funny story. I walk into my first seminar of the year last year, and someone walked up to me and goes, "You're at Dr. Jacob Harden."
Oh
I was
my
like, yes.
gosh.
I actually go by the handle. I actually put the at before my name whenever
That is
I
my
have people
official
ask me.
name.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
Yeah, that's the
Jake.
official title.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jake. Jake's
Cool,
fine.
cool. So tell us about yourself, Jake.
Yeah, so I was doing a little research about you, Jake. I was stalking you a little bit. I Googled your name and all that. So you're from Florida, right? Live in Florida?
Originally, yeah. So I'm from Florida right now. I'm originally from Texas.
Okay. Okay.
And but have my practice here in Florida now.
Okay. So, and did you do your undergrad in Texas? Is that what I remember reading?
Yeah, so grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, went to the University of Texas at Austin, got my undergrad there in human biology, and then
Okay.
came out to Florida and got my doctor of chiropractic.
Awesome. And that's an interesting thing because I know there's chiropractors, there's a lot of different paths that you can kind of take to get to that. Like I have friends that did some an athletic training undergrad, or, some like exercise science type stuff as well. What made you, when you were studying human biology, make you want to go to the chiropractic route?
Well, so I was thinking I was going to be going more of the traditional medical route
Okay.
first and foremost, and then just kind of veered off that path probably 2.5 years into undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
I went straight into undergrad from high school, and I took a large load of classes in high school. I then finished my undergrad degree, my 4-year degree, in 3.5 years.
Wow.
So I was just really kind of burnt out with
Yeah.
school,
Yeah,
and
man.
it sent me off that path of like, man, I can't even envision what that next step is going to be.
Yeah.
So I think it was really a blessing in disguise, though, because it did kind of kick me off that path, but it gave me a lot of time to think too.
Yeah.
So I then, fitness has always been a big thing for me. So I started looking at physical therapy. I started, that kind of natural route that someone might go that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I moved to Florida, because my family moved out this way, I actually ended up being within like 30 minutes of the chiropractic school that I ended up going to. So it was kind of just a good thing for me in that I was able to stay at home during school, save a bunch of money, which allowed me to then open practice right out of school. So it's just kind of, a good decision for me personally to kind of go that route with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate to that too, because my undergrad was initially in biomedical sciences, and then like halfway through, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this thing anymore, man. Like this is intense. So yeah, I could definitely relate to kind of having that coming to Jesus moment and being like, I don't know if I want to do this for the next 8 years of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which Cairo was a 3.5 year commitment, but
Yep.
by that time, having some time off, I took almost a year off after I graduated undergrad and just worked.
Yeah.
And that really just got me kind of remotivated, got me back into the swing of things, ready to take that on again. But yeah, it just I was glad that it's kind of sent me on that path.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about your fitness life, your fitness career. How did you get into what you're doing now?
So started out like I think like most of us, adolescent sport, just multi-sport athlete, playing basketball, baseball, tennis. Those were kind of my big three. Eventually focused a lot more in on baseball and tennis. And then when I went to college, I didn't really have that competitive environment anymore to work with, which I think a lot of us kind of find ourselves in.
Right.
But along the way, I had found the weight room and absolutely loved that. It was a thing that like me and my dad did over the summers. So like we had that community aspect of it all, and that was kind of our bonding thing. So that really stuck with me and really started going to the gym more often in college. And so that then translated over to me competing in powerlifting in the USAPL once I graduated from chiropractic school. And that's kind of where I've been recently. Took about a year, almost, I guess it's been about 2 years now since I competed last.
Okay.
But going to try and hop back into a meet and get back on the platform here soon now that travel and life and work and everything is in a little bit better spot.
That's super interesting. I feel like a lot of people go through that too. They get done with high school. For me, I got done with college athletics, and then I was like, well, I'm not ready to be done competing. Like I still want that competitive environment. So that's what kind of brought me to the sport as well. So.
Yeah, it gives you a reason to show up every day, right?
Yeah, having that date on the calendar and having something to train for, it just adds a little bit of just
Little
intensity
spice.
and a little of course.
Little spice to your ginger snap.
Yeah, I think it's also like we kind of crave structure as athletes.
Yes.
Yeah, so you miss
We
that
don't
when it's
necessarily
not there.
Yes.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily do well with just I'm going to walk into the gym today and just do something.
Yeah,
Right.
Let's just randomly on the schedule. So you think about powerlifting, you have a pretty regimented plan. Everything's planned out for 6 to 8 weeks at a time. You have, you're thinking block, phase, whatever,
Exactly.
and all that. So it just kind of naturally seems to fit.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
So then the next question, how have you taken, and we know the answer, but how have you taken chiropractic, your passion for fitness, and put it together? Talk to us about Prehab.
So Prehab 101
Yes.
is my company that I started about a year and a half, 2 years ago now. And I mean that it's really just a marketing term, honestly. It's just strength training at the end of the day, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yes.
But I took it that way because as an athlete, I've always understood that exercise is the thing that creates the most long-term progress. And when you look at the current literature, that it would really agree with you there that, exercise is going to be that best long-term option. So as a chiropractor, my scope of practice is pretty wide. It's basically the same scope of practice as a PT. So, we can do exercise. It's not just adjusting and manual therapy and passive modalities and all that. So in our practice, like I've from day one wanted to really help out other people who wanted to stay active. It wasn't we're not a strength conditioning facility by any means, but we treat a lot of like the active general population. So I call them my active gym pop. And so we have squat racks in the office, and we had a full platform in the office.
Yeah.
And, I don't know many chiropractic offices that you're going to walk into and it's like, oh, there's the Ohio Power Bar. So
Right.
because a lot of my guys would walk in and they'd be like, yeah, so I'm having back pain. And I'd ask, all right, well, when? And like, well, only when I deadlift over 600. I'm like, okay, well, I guess we got to load up 600 pounds
Right.
and see what's going on
Load
there.
it up.
And you can't, we can't bust out the kettlebell for that.
Right.
So we did that, and we wanted to, and I was also training out of the office too, so there was the selfish reason out of that for having all the rogue equipment, but I splurged a bit. But it was my thought was originally was, hey, if you got hurt under load, then lobe's probably going to be the thing where you needed to get back to that.
Right.
So, I've developed that thought process a lot more as I've gone along, but there's a lot of things we can do to get symptoms down.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, passive modalities don't get you stronger.
Right.
And if overload, too much
guy.
overload was the reason that you got
so
hurt,
refreshing to hear. It's amazing.
I just want you to know that these two, I sit with them all the time. They are geeking out so hardcore right now because you are beyond speaking their language, and the looks on their faces when you said, listen, if you're having the pain when it's 600 pounds, let's put 600 pounds on the bar. They both just got amped up like they found out that, someone bought him a case of Rockstar and was about to send him to their favorite concert. Like, they just got super amped.
Yeah, because most of the chiropractors I've worked with they're the rack 'em and crack 'em type people. And
it's all passive.
Exactly. Let me put your spine in the right position and
then
go back.
Kick you out the door and say, but do whatever you're doing.
Can we speak on that for a second?
Absolutely.
If I can provide enough force to realign your spine, what the hell is happening when you load up multiple hundreds of pounds on a bar and compress yourself every day?
Right. And how weak is the human body? If someone could just crunch you, or if you're having a muscle issue and a foam roller can fix you,
right?
How weak are we, right?
Yeah.
But so I'm really glad that this is your approach, because again, if I went into some of the physical therapists, chiropractors in the area and said, when I'm doing a snatch over 220 pounds, I feel something in my shoulder, they're going to say stop snatching.
Right.
Where I feel you're going to be the type that says, well, let me see it at 200. Let's see it at 220. Let's see if, that's why, your shoulder's rotating the wrong way, or, something like that, where you can see what the problem is, where they're just guessing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that that's kind of how you approach it.
Yeah. So, and this is why I started teaching, is because obviously, it's a different approach, right? It's not an approach that's kind of traditional in the healthcare realm. I think that people in the strength and conditioning realm really kind of understand this a bit more, but maybe they don't feel as confident helping somebody with a symptom because it's not within their scope of practice to do so. Right. But so as healthcare providers, we need to be able to do this, and we need to have this knowledge that it's like your shoulder hurts whenever you snatch 220. Well, what have you been doing recently in your what's your programming look like first and foremost? Right. Because typically if you're snatching 220, you probably have fairly solid technique to begin with, right? And it's probably not just that your shoulder's just rotating the wrong way.
Right.
It's probably that you had a training load error and you either were under recovered and everything's been an 8 to 9 out of 10 workout for the last, 5, 6, 8 sessions.
Right.
And you just haven't recovered from that, or stress is built up or whatever, or, you felt really good for a few days, a few sessions in a row, and you've just been spiking your training load up way more than your body was ready for, even though you kind of felt good, and then it kind of caught up to you on the back end.
Right. Yes. And again, I'm so glad to know that there are some people out there that actually take that into consideration. Pull out your notebook if you have one, right?
Yeah.
And what is your program? And I would assume if, let's say, that athlete came to you and said, yeah, when I hit 100 kilo snatch, it hurts, and you said, let me see your program, and they don't have one, there's a huge red flag. Now, in that...
Yeah, that's something we need to think about.
Yeah, in that situation, do you provide some programming advice? Do you sit down with them and talk programming? Do you have coaches that go to this coach and they can help you? How do you deal with that if it's a programming issue?
A little bit of all of that. If I have a good network of coaches that I can refer to just from people I know. Everybody's, coaching online now these days too. Right. So makes it very easy to send somebody out, to get a good program if needed. And that just depends on if they have the funds to afford that and whatever. But if they just don't have something, then we kind of just have to talk through it. Okay, well, give me a general idea of what you've been doing. What does your frequency look like? What does the general structure look like? Are you on a 6-day-a-week push-pull leg? Are you on a 2 days a week, 4-day a week upper lower? If we're talking weightlifting, because I was just working with a weightlifter maybe 2 days ago who was dealing with a bit of a hip impingement case, then it's going to be a little bit more varied in the stressors. It's not necessarily just a set, this is what I do on Monday kind of thing.
Right.
So, like, all right, did you have a break recently and you
Mhm.
just came back? Which was kind of the case that I was just working with was, well, there's a 10-day vacation, came back and
Mm.
hit a heavy front squat,
Right.
and the hip wasn't too happy with that.
Right.
Um, but we look back and, well, training's been kind of sporadic
Mm.
over the last maybe 6 months since nationals. So, okay, so training's been kind of sporadic for you. It hasn't been super structured the way it was. Then you took a vacation. Then you came back and you were kind of hitting some RPE 9 stuff.
Yes.
That's probably not the best. That's probably not
Right.
the best
Yeah.
idea. So I don't necessarily need to see the exact numbers
Mhm.
to have a good idea that that's probably a training load error, and some simple education on,
Right.
Right.
okay, so let's get the pain under control. We're going to work everything out of the power position for a little bit. We're just going to avoid that position that kind of hurts, which is a huge thing for medical providers to understand is,
Right.
hey, there's other stuff you can do to stay strong, but
Right.
that does kind of avoid that position besides just, hey, don't snatch.
Right.
So if we're going to work everything out of the power position, we then found some tolerable kind of hip flexion options. We found like the Bulgarian split squat was a good option that could be pushed into those strength ranges.
Yes.
We found a really narrow stance squat with the heels elevated was tolerable. So we're working there right now. And, so that was just kind of, let's get the symptoms down.
Yes.
But that took us probably 15, 20 minutes
Mhm.
to do. We spent a half hour before that talking training load
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just the education process of, all right, so whenever we do start dosing in that hip flexion again, everything's going to start around RPE 6.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want anything really hard in that position for a little bit. And we're going to go RPE 6 week 1, we'll go RPE 7 week 2, RPE 8 week 3, and then we'll start dosing up volume on top of that.
Yeah.
And, it's just kind of the general principles of, hey, how would you treat somebody brand new to the gym,
Yes.
right?
Right.
True.
Just giving them, like, making
That's
them
kind of how you
aware.
treat somebody coming out of injury too.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
Just because, talking through that stuff, and just because a lot of people, I mean, they just train and they don't really have necessarily a rhyme or reason, or just don't have the education behind the programming that they're doing. So they're just kind of doing something and they don't know why they're doing it, or they don't know how that could be affecting their body in whatever way it is right now. So just making them aware, like, hey, you said that you did this and that is why you're feeling this way. So then they kind of make that connection. They're like, oh, okay. So now they can make changes in the future, which is a huge tool to any athlete.
Right. And I think it's awesome
Yeah.
that you consider specificity as much as possible. How close can we get to, the front squat, the snatch, whatever, without having to go on the couch for 2 weeks? Because
Yeah.
you're not going to get stronger, or like you said, or really recover if you're just on the couch, because you're going to come back, and if being sporadic was the problem already, that's not helping at all.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's such a breath of fresh air hearing this from a chiropractor, from just someone in the medical profession,
Yeah.
where, hey, we need to be as specific as possible because you actually have some goals you need to obtain. It's very
And
nice to hear.
that goes, I mean, I think that actually makes the rehab easier
Yeah.
when you stay specific too. For example, if we know that, let's say that's not like a impingement sensitivity and that you're really sensitive to a particular range of motion, but more so it's like a load sensitivity.
Yeah.
So I have some sort of patellar tendinopathy. It is getting flared up at a certain load on my back squat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really need to come up with the 5 best patellar tendinopathy exercises.
Right.
You've told me what touches it. So if I do back squats, because it hurts you, I'm guaranteed that I am loading the thing I need to load.
Right.
Mm.
Right.
Whether
exactly.
whether I know what it is or not,
Mhm.
I am guaranteed it's touching that.
Right.
So when I look at like a lot of my orthopedic tests I do for someone, I'm really thinking of them as pain provocation tests. And I'm just thinking about, okay, so what's the force vector here that we're using? What's the level of load that we're using here? Because there's probably an exercise that mimics that same force vector across the joint. So I can then, if something's provocative for them, I can probably then take an exercise, provoke it the same way, and then just dial in the right dosage for them in order to bring those symptoms back to a tolerable level, which is going to allow us to maintain some of our physical attributes, given that they can tolerate enough load.
Right.
Which, if they can't, then we have to find some sort of pain-free or other tolerable option,
Right.
that would allow them to do that. but it's going to allow us to at least touch that and possibly desensitize it and become more tolerable to it, so that we can then get back to those higher loads.
Right.
So if my knee's hurting whenever I squat, let's say a normal squat training for me is going to be 300 pounds. Right now, my knee's so sensitive that I feel it whenever I'm squatting 250. All right, well, 300's normal, 250. All right, if we squat 245, something like that, we hit it for some higher rep ranges, that's probably still providing us a physical stimulus.
Right.
So why not just do that?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like that, and then just gradually dose up. So the exercise in and of itself is just kind of the vector to provide the load or to provide the stress. It's how we dose the stress that's actually what we need to do. On the flip side, well, let's say it's so sensitive that I'm feeling it with the empty bar, or I'm feeling it with 100 pounds. Well, now it's a different ball game, because it's probably not enough to just say, hey, let's do some higher reps with that and we'll get some sort of physical stimulus out of it. So in that case, this is where we might need to think, all right, let's add in some tempo work. Let's add in, maybe change the range of motion to a box squat. Let's maybe try a lunge and see if we can tolerate something where we're going to be reaching failure in that, 8 to 12 range, 6 to 10 range, something, get that physical stimulus that we want. And then we can work with those low loads on that back squat, which is not going to be anywhere near fatigue for you. And we can do that pretty frequently because of the low fatigue, and gradually improve your tolerance to it. Let's just add 5 pounds as you're able to. And eventually that back squat's going to be back to a stimulating level. We'll then switch out some of the other stuff that we've been doing as an alternative. Back squat now becomes the rehab, and we're getting everything, transitioning back to normal training.
I think that is like the key to having a prolonged career, because like a lot of people have issues with, if they've been a powerlifter for a long period of time, they say, oh, my joints hurt, whatnot. But if you, like what you just explained, if you apply that to your training period, so like if you notice something that's like, ooh, that's not really feeling right, and you do that top-down method that you kind of just explained right there, and before, it's because, I mean, I was exposed to powerlifting back when it was like multiply was really big, and we had all these juiced up freaking cycles that were just like go 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 go. But like there's still some of that around, and these egos play a huge part in the sport. Period. So guys just want to push through stuff. They want to be hardcore. They want to But if you are proactive with that, and that's one thing that I think it takes a lot of maturity as an athlete to realize, okay, there's something obviously going on here, and I can either address it so that it doesn't become an issue, or there's a lot of people that'll just push through it and say, F it, I gotta hit this number today, so I'm gonna go balls to the wall anyway. That can definitely hurt you more, or prolong injuries, or create
if it takes
injuries
you out for 6 months now because you're hurt.
And know that's 6 months that you aren't getting stronger and aren't training.
And to piggyback off of that, from the athlete's perspective, if let's say they needed to back squat 300 and you have them down to 245, or let's say it's even 225, but you have them squatting twice a week now instead of once, to the athlete, they're still at least doing their sport. They can see the light at the end of the tunnel. If my pain tolerance goes back up, cool, I can go back to squatting once a week and I will get back to 300, where, sorry, go sit on the couch. It just sucks. I'm so glad that you have this approach too. And worst case, we'll do box squats. Worst case yet, we'll do lunges. Worst case yet, fine, maybe we'll pull in a machine or whatever. But we will still be doing some type of squat-like mechanic. And I think from an athlete's perspective, that's huge.
Well, it gives them there's some output, because that's the worst feeling when you're hurt and you feel like you're powerless and can't do anything. So when you're able to actually still train or just go to the gym and like do something, that's not only is it helping you physically, but it's mentally a lot easier to deal with than if you're just like, F it, I can't do anything, I'm not going to go to the gym.
And I think you touched on
that's a huge point. So I think we get this. I don't think it's just not talked about nearly enough, which is the psychological side of this whole thing, the mental side of all this.
It's so huge, man.
I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Do we actually need to get stronger to get out of pain? That's a big question that I think that we need to ask, and I don't think you do.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
Pain is about sensitivity for the grand majority of things, pain is about sensitivity. So if like you don't need to be more mobile to get out of pain. You don't need to be stronger to get out of pain. Now you might need to be stronger to be able to tolerate the training that you actually want to be able to do to perform.
Right.
So there's that like
Yes.
distinguishing line in that. But for getting yourself out of pain, it's probably a lot more about what you don't do. It's probably about just, hey, stop aggravating it over and over and over.
Yes.
Keep a positive mindset towards it. Don't catastrophize it and make it out to be worse than what it is. So a huge part of that, and this is working with anybody, not just athletes, is you got to make the rehab and the exercises that you're giving them meaningful to them.
Yes.
It needs to mean something to them. So if you have somebody who is used to really hard workouts, they're used to really pushing themselves, they're used to heavy weight on their back, and then you're giving them clamshells and crab walks with a band around their
and
knees,
dead bugs, and
like, how defeating does that feel to that person? Right? I feel like even the exercise prescription there can promote a feeling of like a defeatist mentality.
Yes.
Versus scaling down just as much as you need to scale and then saying, okay, here's just something that you can do 20 reps, but I want you to take it to 18.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care that it's 18 reps. I don't care that, like, I know it sucks.
Yeah.
But you need it to suck because that's what's going to be good for you.
Right.
Yeah.
So you still feel like you're pushing yourself. You still feel like you're doing something. You're still in your community. So let's say you're at some powerlifting gym or a CrossFit gym. Like, you're in your community. You're there working just as hard as everybody else is. And you feel like you're still a part of it all.
Yes.
So you don't feel like you've been taken away from your life as much. And so that, I don't know how much of a physical stimulus the rehab is really providing you. I don't know that getting you stronger is really having any effect on your pain in that case. But I think that what it's doing in the background in your brain is probably having a huge effect on those symptoms reducing and you pushing yourself back to normal.
Yeah. So this really hits home for me because I'm a power lifter. I haven't done a meet in over a year now. And like over the past 2 years, I've just been like little aches and pains, and I've been like in pain for like 2 years while I'm training. And again, I was like, one, I didn't want to get weaker, right? And the pain wasn't to the point where like I couldn't perform the lifts until it got to the point where I couldn't perform the lifts, and then so now I'm finally like this past 3 months, I've been like finally pain-free. And I can't even like describe how invigorating it is just to be training pain-free and not be worrying about something going wrong and having that in the back of your head at all times. Like, oh, something's going to freaking, go wrong, pop, or something's going to happen here. And so, and that was one thing that I struggled with too. 'Cause like I had to sometimes force myself to go into the gym just for my mental health. Just to like, because the gym not only, is it, but it's my social hour too. I get to see my friends, I get to hang out with people, I get to chat. But being hurt, like you said, it kind of pulled you out of that because you're like, well, I can't really do what everyone else is doing. I feel like I'm not a part of everything anymore. So when you can supplement things in there, so where you can, because it seriously does affect you. Like, I wouldn't say I was depressed, but there was definitely like, I wasn't fired up about training anymore because I was like, well, what am I going to do? I'm just going to go in there and do stupid shit because I can't do anything. And when I'm training with these strong ass people, it makes you feel kind of bad about yourself. But so what you just described is huge for athletes. And like we said, I don't think it's talked about nearly enough is that mental approach that comes with injuries. It's like, because it can be debilitating to someone who, especially if someone puts a lot of their identity into what they lift in the sport and all that stuff. If that's taken away, that can really affect somebody.
Right.
Yeah. If you really look at, because we've all dealt with pain. Like, we've all dealt with our stuff that, I would say like we all deal with our little aches and pains, but we never consider ourselves injured.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a huge piece is like, at some point you start to label yourself as injured rather than labeling yourself as like healthy and capable.
Exactly.
So if you can kind of maintain that label on yourself of capable and able, that's huge. But if when we look at people that just deal with persistent pain, and this certainly is not everyone, but we see high levels of catastrophization. So they make the pain out to be worse than what it is. It's really taken
Yeah.
away from their quality of life. They can't stop thinking about it. There tends to be a fear of re-injury, so they
Mhm.
might be afraid to really push themselves. Like you were saying, like it feels really good to just not be pain-free and not have to
Not
worry
have to
about it,
worry about it. Yeah, and
right?
I've just been able to start to push myself, and I feel like my old self again. And it's just like I have this
Yeah.
intensity when it comes to training and stuff that I haven't had in a long time.
Right.
So
And
a big part of this is really just getting someone kind of bought into this process of, hey, you understand that you're injured. You understand that, hey, you can't do everything that you used to be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality of the situation right now. But you are going to get back there.
right.
You are going to be back at full speed again, just because, remember whenever your elbow hurt you, 6 months ago, you just kind of rested it up. You didn't really think about it. You just
Yep.
worked around it, and then it kind of cleared itself out over time.
Right.
I know this is a bit of a bigger injury, and I know you're kind of walking around feeling a little crippled right now because it's so acute, but no one walks around in acute pain forever. This is
Right.
going to get better, and then you're just going to need to ride this part out, and then we're going to slowly start working you back up
Mm-hmm.
into normal training again. Believe me, I've been there because I hurt my back 2.5 years ago, on a max effort back squat.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I was super fatigued, and like I'd probably been missing lifts for 3-4 weeks in a
Okay.
row at that point. And I was, I was at like 97.5% or
Yep.
something like
You're
that,
right up at that red
98%,
line.
right up there. Yeah. And, you know, I, I distinctly remember like I had this I felt like a really sore spot in the side of my hip, which is like a good indicator for me that your back's feeling a little sensitive right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're a little beat up. And like I was in desperate need of a deload at that point.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But then I squat 395, and just the thing that happens every time I get that heavy, we've all seen it, knee shot back, hip shot up, kind of
Yep.
good morning it
Mm-hmm.
up. And it really was kind of that straw that broke the camel's back for me, because I've done that same mechanic 100 times over, and it's never hurt me before. It's just, but the cumulative stress of everything that was
Right.
going on at that time point, and then just being overly fatigued, I just felt it grab me right in
Right.
my back. And I did not walk for like 3 days. I was
Oh,
just laid up on the
Wow.
couch, and it
Yeah.
happened to be on the same weekend as Raw Nationals.
Oh, yeah.
So of
Of
course
course.
I'm sitting there
Watching all
like
these people crush
watching
weights.
all my friends at Raw Nationals on YouTube, and I'm sitting here like laid up on the couch. I can barely walk over to my kitchen to make
Right.
a
I
sandwich.
couldn't
Wow.
squat if there was $1
But
million. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, no, not at all. Like I'm literally on like trying to like get down to the ground to like just move my back a little bit and do some cat
Right.
cows or something. But like I've been through that, and I know like that sucks, because I remember, my pain. I got back into the gym probably a week afterwards. I was squatting an empty bar for a week, and I just did kind of like an every minute on the minute,
Mm-hmm.
for 10 minutes straight. And I would just add 5 pounds a day.
Yeah.
And I did it every single day. And like 6 weeks in, I squatted 365.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Now I didn't necessarily feel wonderful, and I did kind of detrain a bit through that, but I didn't feel necessarily like my full normal self for probably a year.
Yeah.
Like I could do it, but I didn't feel like my full normal self. But I just worked through it, and it's like, okay, there's gonna be days that are more sensitive. There's gonna be days that I feel better. This is just kind of part of that process. Whenever maybe you had a little bit of an injury, it's all good, and you're just gonna keep dialing it up. Now here I am, 2.5 years removed from that, and I feel like I'm about to surpass those numbers, and I haven't felt a backache in like 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like you just have to keep kind of gradually
Right.
working at it, and you have to figure out like, okay, this isn't working for me right now, but this over here does. So we're going to work with that, and we're just going to keep providing the stimulus to the body. And you never really let yourself just detract from everything that enjoy.
Yeah. And I think too, I think you posted about this recently too, but especially in the sport of powerlifting, when there's no, like, you can powerlift till the day you die. So patience is a huge key. And the biggest thing, because I'm 23 years old, I'm young, and I've been basically up to last year, all my training went absolutely wonderful, right? I'm making gains, every single block. I basically, newbie gains, and I hadn't gotten injured. I'm like, this is awesome, man. I'm going to be able to do this forever. But then, I mean, kind of reality slaps you in the face. But biggest thing is like, you have time. We have nothing but time. So maybe like I haven't hit a PR in over a year and a half, but like, that's okay, because I'm going to hit a PR in 5 weeks from now, or a year from now, or whatever. So I think that's the biggest thing, especially young lifters. They can't really conceptualize or comprehend just that, like, there's time, and that's okay that this is going to take time, but you'd rather it take time than knock you out of the sport forever.
Right.
Absolutely. And, like, that is super hard for somebody to get on board with, of like, you haven't PR'd in a year and a half. That's a tough pill to swallow for people, but I think even more so, people have trouble just going lighter on a bad day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like I run a fully, like, my program's fully auto-regulated. I don't actually, like, I have target weights that I kind of plan to hit, but it's all off RPE. And I posted about this, I think, recently, that, if you have a bad day, you have a bad day. Just go lighter, because man, you don't build fitness in a session.
Right.
Exactly.
Like, you build fitness across multiple sessions, across months, but you can build an inordinate amount of fatigue in a single session. Like, you can ruin a training block in a session.
Yeah.
Right.
So, like, I was over in Australia, and I had just been on my feet over in Brisbane and walking around. It was like record highs and everything over there. And I'd been teaching for 2 days. And then I went and had a bench workout, and I was supposed to hit 240 for a double at an 8. And then I get up to 230, and it's like already an 8.
Yeah.
I'm like, well,
Shit.
crap.
Where do I go from here?
So, but so I just stopped right there. I did my 230, because at the end of the day, it's not about moving a weight. It's about providing a stress to the system to create an adaptation. And that has been a big point that I try and get my athletes to understand, is that you're not in there to hit a weight that day.
Yes.
You're in there to provide a stress. The weight is simply an objective marker of progress.
Right.
And you shouldn't necessarily be looking for that objective marker of progress every single session. You should be looking to trend in the right direction over time. So
I have so many athletes that need to hear that like 15 more times.
Yeah.
Because again, I do all of my programming is RPE based as well. And I find, like I said, especially kind of with younger athletes, I think that they should be getting stronger like session to session. And I'm like, that would be fine and good if you did that. That'd be amazing. But that's not really, like, that's not sustainable. There's no way you could do that forever.
It's not the reality of life.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that's cool. Like, yeah, if you're in your first year of training, then you could maybe have more linear progress. But like, I've been going through this personally too, is like this last week, because I'm a carpenter by trade. So my normal day job, I do ceiling work, and it's not really physically taxing at all. But this last week I did like wood framing. So I'm literally swinging a hammer all day long, and I'm bent over and I'm picking up walls and doing all this stuff. And like this week of training, just I realized, I'm like, hey, you got to kind of conceptualize that, like, it's not really going to be there. I mean, you were working your ass off all day. Like, you can't expect to go into the gym and hit like a PR or a rep PR, or have necessarily a great session. So I tell my athletes too, is you kind of have to just realize what you have going into the gym, and realize like, hey, maybe I didn't get enough sleep last night. Maybe I didn't eat as much before the session that I normally do. And kind of take that into consideration when you're working up towards that top set or whatever, and feeling how the weight feels, and kind of using that to pick that top set. And not, like you said, the weight is just a stimulus. Like, at the end of the day, yeah, we're power lifters, so the weight you lift matters on the platform, but not necessarily day to day.
Right. And I want to say actually two things. One, with all the framing that you were doing, for all you know, that stimulus from lifting walls being bent over, maybe now your deadlift sucks because your lower back is fatigued.
Right.
But who knows, 3 months from now, that stimulus, you super compensate. Now you have a bigger deadlift, right? Because all of a
We'll say
sudden,
farm boy strong, right?
Exactly.
That's what we say out in Texas.
you can handle more stress. And then also when Jake was saying that he goes day by day, something I want the athletes to hear too is, let's say on a Tuesday you're just not feeling great, and that, whatever bench at an 8 was maybe not the number you wanted. Well, maybe you reserve a little in the tank that day, even though you feel stressed. Who knows? Friday, an RPE 8 squat might be a PR because you took the time to realize, hey, today I just don't have it. But again, being hopeful in that, who knows, maybe a week from now, a PR.
Right. And instead of pushing it that day when you know it's not necessarily there and kind of driving yourself into that hole, you're like, you realize that and you're like, all right, well, take this day as it is and then just move on.
Right. And it comes full circle to
that's what happened. Oh. That's what happened to me too. Like I hit 250 for 3 at an 8 the 4 weeks later.
Yeah.
Which is, I had ended my last training block at 250 for 3 and at an RPE 10.
Yeah.
And I had the video of it, like me just like grinding it out near death.
Yeah.
And then, here I am just like, it's flying up. So 230 for 2 at an 8 took the day and said, okay, here's the stimulus. And then there's 250 for 3. It just comes along. You just trend.
Right.
Yes.
Patience, like you said.
Right.
And also going back to the prehab thing. So you have to do lighter back squats or box squats or lunges or whatever. But again, same deal with whether you're framing a house or whatever, or you're doing 230 at an 8. Eventually it's going to, again, super compensate. Who knows? 6 weeks from now, you're PRing.
Yeah. You have to look at the bigger picture, not necessarily the day.
Yeah.
Because there's times when you go into the gym, you're like, man, I really, really, really want to hit this number today. But I always tell my athletes, that number's always going to be there.
Right.
You know what I mean? Okay, a 600-pound squat wasn't there today, but who knows about next week? Who knows about the week after? And those don't even matter. It's what's going to be there on the meet day.
Right.
So you just have, people just have this issue with these numbers. They put too much meaning on these numbers. And I think Instagram is to fucking blame on this one because it drives me nuts because people literally just lift to put up a freaking picture of a video on Instagram to see how many likes they get. And just like, hey, my training's going super, super good. This is a PR. It's like, okay, but you're 6 weeks out from a meet. And then you go to a meet and you don't even hit that number. It's like, what really matters to you?
Right.
Does it matter how you perform on the day that you're supposed to perform well, or how you performed on this day that no one cares about 6 weeks ago?
The word is desperation. So that's something that I always tell my athletes. If you feel you desperately need to hit this number, don't even try today because you are going to risk something. So with Jake, when he was missing lifts for a few weeks in a row, he felt to himself, I need to get 395, throw caution to the wind. I'm desperate. Now you get hurt.
Yeah.
Do you think it's less desperation, though, and more validation? Because we're kind of an individual sport, and, we don't always have somebody there going, hey, Brooke, that depth looked really great on that squat. But me being the one who has been battling mobility issues and finally am hitting depth well on my squat, it felt amazing. It was like this amazing endorphin rush to be in a team lift and have Neil walk up and go, where the hell did all this depth come from, Brooke? Oh my God. And I'm like, it feels great. But when we are a lot of times solo in a gym and we're going through the motions and we're already fatigued mentally and physically and we're getting through this programming, sometimes it makes me wonder if we're fighting more for validation than we are for desperation of number.
Right.
Because we feel the only way we're going to get that validation is if we're the shiniest thing there.
Yeah.
And to retrain our minds to not want to always have to be the shiniest thing is something that is way beyond programming. Right. It is way beyond everything. That's so introspective. And but I do agree. I think Instagram has done that. It's made it so much easier to receive, in my opinion, what is a very false, a very non-authentic validation, but it still feels good. It's like a drug.
Yeah. And I want to say something that Jake will appreciate, and he's been kind of touching base on a little bit today, is, Brooke, you didn't get to depth on squat with an empty bar or air squats. You added load.
Yeah.
Right? And load over time, your body could deal with, okay, maybe I'm not past parallel, but I'm close. And then you would try it a little again and again, but load is what did it. And Jake was saying that, the empty bar isn't going to provide enough stimulus for your body to change. And that's something that so many people need to realize, is that if you cut your weight in half, you might need to go to a different exercise. You might need to try something else because, again, if you were squatting 400, now you're squatting 200 and you're only doing it once a week, that is not enough load.
Right. And one thing that we did with Brooke, because Brooke is my shining star athlete here. And
thank you. He's only saying that because I'm sitting right in front of him and I can turn off his mic.
Yeah.
No, but I
And
will
she
say,
will.
I will say, so Brooke had a meet this last weekend and she hit depth and got 3 white lights on a squat for the first time ever. And like she started crying and I literally started crying because it had been a 1.5 year process that we were going through this. And one thing that we did is like, I always had you squat. You always squatted, but we had the loads, you know, a little bit lighter, but we didn't stop squatting because you couldn't hit depth. But I just added in other movements to still give you a little bit more stimulus so we can add a little bit more strength there. But yeah, it was, I'll just say it was pretty incredible to see you hit depth there. And when I was like sitting back there watching your lift behind the side judge and I saw you and I'm like, there's no question there. Like that is clearly depth. I'm like, this is incredible.
Well, and I'm going to actually toot Mr. Harden's, J-Rod's horn here. It's funny because I have been through you shouldn't be squatting at all. Oh, you shouldn't be doing this. Or when you said dead bug earlier, it triggered me hardcore inside my soul. Because everybody put me into these stupid little PT movements and they said, well, you just need to make your VMO stronger or you just need to, no. So I had been battling through all these different things everybody kept telling me to do. And I read, it was actually one of your posts on patience and picking 1 or 2 things that seem to work for you, but don't give up on them, stick with them. And I had started doing this glute routine because I wasn't feeling my glutes in the hole. And mentally it was kind of scary. I'm like, how am I going to get out of this with this weight on my back? So I started doing literally 4 simple movements. That's it. 4 simple movements that lit my butt on fire and a couple others that were actually to really help open up the mobility in my hips. And I stuck with them for like 3 weeks.
Right.
And now all of a sudden I'm still sticking with them. And the more that I continue to consistently do those 4 simple things that weren't dead bugs, that weren't take me away from what my goal was, I'm literally, even in our team session over the weekend and non-competition, nobody's really watching, I'm still hitting depth in my squats. And I don't know that I would have done that if I hadn't stuck it out with those 4 basic movements.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, Jake. So in Brooke's case, she's getting more out of less, but at what point do you feel she can go away from those exercises because the squat is doing it enough? Like, do you say, hey, you know what, you can do those 4 exercises forever? Or at what point and how do you make that decision of when to pull them out?
When she feels comfortable doing that.
Okay. Yeah.
In all honesty, like there is no right or wrong answer there.
Right.
You just kind of have to test things.
Yeah.
You have to give a trial run with stuff. You don't know until you know. So I would say, hey, you know what? It's been pretty consistent. You're feeling the way you want to feel. You're hitting depth the way you want to hit depth. So, hey, maybe let's try and not do that routine this week
and just see what happens. Yeah.
Let's just see what happens, right? Let's try and I think that having because there can be a little bit of a psychological dependence that can come along with some of those routines and stuff.
Makes you feel good. Yeah.
Yeah. So we see this, people get into their rituals, especially, some people, think that like, oh, I can't train today if I don't foam roll or something
for 90 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes people just keep tacking on things in their warm up and it drives me nuts.
Yeah.
You've been warming up for an hour. Yeah, go do something.
So I have what we kind of have our little tier system with warm-ups that we use. And it's just really,
where can I find this tier system? Do you have it on
I
the
read it.
Oh, okay,
it's been written into, just look at any of the captions that I talk about warm-ups on. You'll hear me reference it.
Cool.
But tier 1 is your bare bones. All right, I'm walking into the gym. I feel pretty good today. I'm just going to get under the bar, and the bar and my workups on that, my feel it out sets, that is the warm up. And that should be the end goal for all of us.
Yes.
Is to be able to walk into the gym and just do the damn thing.
Yeah.
I love this guy.
Yeah, me too, man.
Right.
God.
So tier 2.
Tier 2. I'm walking into the gym today. I'm feeling kind of stiff. Maybe I was framing or something all day. And I just feel like I need something to just get me loose.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where you might throw in some of your dynamic stretches. This is where you might throw in some of your movement flows. A lot of the routines that I tend to show on my page are that tier 2 side of things. And then you would move to the empty bar, do your workups, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of where Brooke's at with her glute routine, right? That's that'd be like a tier 2. Moving from tier 2 to tier 1 is just, you just got to try it and say, I've been feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
I feel pretty good today. Yeah. So let me just drop into a couple air squats, see how I feel. Yep, feels pretty good. Let's go to the bar, right? And we just try. And maybe it feels the way you want it to feel, or maybe it doesn't. And then finally, you have like a tier 3, which is your really elaborate warm up. And that may be somebody who's dealing with an ache or a pain or an injury. And it's like, all right, I need to do these 3 exercises to kind of just make my shoulder feel good before I get in. That's where I'm going to add in my bands. Maybe I do need to do my crab walks and, all that stuff. Then I'm going to do some dynamic stretches, and then I'm going to go and finally get working. Right. But that should really be reserved for somebody who's like pretty beat up. Right. Like like I'm coming up on peaking kind of thing. I'm deep into a prep kind of thing. Like I just don't feel the way I would normally feel on a good day. Yeah. So I need to do a little low intensity, low fatigue work in order to just get my body kind of moving, get my joints feeling like they can actually be ready to accept some load. Right. Yeah.
Is that why, like, when we do get closer to the end of a cycle, I'll say to Cole, like, I feel like I have to do way more sets in my squats. Like, it'll take me 3, 4, 5 sets before I even start to, you know what I mean? Where you feel that just groove, everything feels smooth and like it's supposed to be happening. And it'll take me a lot longer when we get towards the end of programming coming up on a meet to actually feel comfortable under the bar again. Yeah. Embrace the suck.
Yeah.
You have all that accumulative fatigue that's kind of been ramping up all the way through the prep, and then now you're feeling all that too, and we're still kind of pushing that intensity a little bit towards the end of that prep, and so that's when you need
so if you look at the fitness and fatigue model of performance, which I would recommend anybody who wants to should go read Chris Beardsley's blog on Medium if that wants to read on that. Yeah. So performance at any given point, we've all kind of probably seen that performance curve, that stimulus recovery adaptation or SRA curve. Yep. That curve is it's the summation of fitness and fatigue at any given time point. So fitness being all those positive adaptations of training we make, fatigue being, hey, you're tired, you're beat up, tissues are damaged and need to heal, et cetera, et cetera. So in order for us to actually get that super compensation effect, that huge peaking effect, you are building up fitness in the background through all the stimulus that you provide. Yep. But in order to provide all that stimulus, it comes at a fatigue cost. Right. And so especially as you're coming into a powerlifting meet, like there is no way to do an easy double at 98%, right? Right. Yeah. It either is an RPE 9 or it's an RPE 8 or it's failure. Right, and that's just what it is. There is no RPE 6 double. No. So
and if it is, go heavier, damn it.
If there is, you got to go heavier. So at that point, you can't get away from fatigue because the RPEs have to be so high on every single set. So as you're coming into that meet, you're going to be accumulating a lot of that fatigue, which is going to mask a lot of the fitness, because if you just think of it from a pure math equation, fitness being positive addition, fatigue being negative subtraction, it can look like 0, or it can look like you're not making or it can look like even so. If you look at it, let's say a squat for 200 pounds for 6 reps is baseline performance. If you built fitness on top of that, you go to 205. But if you build fatigue, you might do 195. Right. Obviously, we want to trend up, trend up, trend up. And we see that across a training cycle. But then we get near the end of that cycle, and you might even see a little bit of a dip in performance, or performance looks like it stalls or it slows down. Yes. And then what do? We taper, or we deload. And then what happens there is fitness builds slower, but it also drops off slower. Fatigue builds quickly, but it drops off quickly. So in that taper week where we keep our intensity high, or we keep that intensity high during the deload, but we drop the volume of work that we do, that brings the fatigue down. So now we've just balanced out the equation, and all that fitness manifests.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Which the performance now manifests, and what we see as a super compensation was really something
really
you
there.
had
Yeah.
all along.
Yeah.
Right.
That's super interesting. And I hope a lot of my athletes are listening right now, because I have a couple athletes who have a meet this next weekend. So they're, you know, at the peak level of fatigue. And we hit openers yesterday, and some of them were kind of like discouraged because they're like, man, I feel like that should have moved faster. I'm like, hey, no, I mean, you are at the worst that you're going to get right now.
Right.
So the fact that moved that well,
The fact that you moved it at
you
all.
moved it at all, that's
Yeah.
At all, yeah.
right.
Right.
That's good. That's good. So now, you know, when you pull back that taper, everything's going to come through. You're going to rest, recover, sleep, eat, do whatever you have to do, so that, and that's the reason why if you look at someone's like Instagram where they post like their openers, they look maybe a lot slower than they did on meet day. Meet day, that they freaking blow that thing up, and it's like, holy crap, where did that come from? It's like you said, it's been there all along, but when you subtract that fatigue, that's what really you uncover that fitness that you've developed throughout the whole training cycle.
Yeah. So I want
So
to.
having
Finish what you were
I
saying.
want to
Yep.
touch something if you. So understanding that has a couple implications in that, going back to what we said, like take the easy day, don't fatigue, because whenever you come in and you're already fatigued and everything's moving like crap, you going heavier and doing more volume than you really should be doing on that day is adding fatigue to an already fatigued system.
Right.
And so that can just drive you further into a recovery debt. Maybe you can't even overcome that recovery debt. And at that point, then you can really just ruin an entire training block, because you just can't drop off, or you're going to have to deload way sooner than expected.
Or longer.
So,
yeah,
or longer, right? So there's that. So if you understand that it's just this balancing act all the time, you're like, okay, I know it's a bad day. It's because of fatigue that it's a bad day, because obviously I didn't just get exponentially weaker in a week.
Right.
Like that just didn't.
That doesn't
that's not
happen.
happening.
Yeah.
Right. I still have those force production capabilities within me. So you understand it's fatigue. So you take what's there. You will then recover better going into the next week. And then you're going to see that it's probably there.
Right.
On the flip side of that, if you actually want to be able to take advantage of a taper or a deload or a peak, you have to have the fatigue.
You have to push it sometimes.
So
you have to know when to
that
push it and know when to kind of
draw back.
Exactly. And that's, I think that's when a coach can come into play a big time, or just a more experienced lifter kind of knows when to make those training decisions.
Yeah. What I'll tell my weightlifting athletes is sometimes on your bad days, that's the best thing possible, because you are fatigued, like you've been saying, Jake, in that you should see it as a benefit, a good thing. So you have to take a few lighter today, no big deal, but we know we're doing enough.
Yeah.
We're at least doing enough, because if we're not doing enough, you're not going to get better.
Right. And so those first weeks coming out of a deload, those should be easy weeks, because fatigue's really low. You haven't accumulated it. That means, hey, just because it feels easy doesn't mean go and throw 3 extra sets of work in there. It doesn't mean throw the weight even higher because fatigue is low right now. It's supposed to feel that way. It's going to get harder as we go.
Right.
And this kind of goes into the whole long-term training of it all, that whole long-term planning, in that it's supposed to undulate. There's supposed to be periods where it's easier. There's supposed to be periods where it's really hard. And somewhere in the middle, it's just going to be challenging.
Yeah. And
the majority of it should be challenging.
Right. And I have a good example of this past weekend. I had an athlete who we worked up to it was 2 weeks ago. So they worked up to their top single, and then they had like 4 sets of 2 on the back down. And like after the 4th set, like it still looked really good. And I'm like, you know what? We're going to do 2 more sets, because like right now is the time to push that fatigue level, and it's okay right now to do this. So that set looked really good. There's no form breakdown or nothing. You can handle this little more volume. Well, let's do it. And then it gives you an opportunity. We worked on commands a little bit more, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's all knowing when to push it, when to hold back, and kind of and how that's going to affect your performance.
And knowing that the next week your goal is just openers, you can be a little bit more fatigued, because you're not risking anything. Because if this was 4 weeks ago, now you might be risking something.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. There's no like you're much more comfortable doing some sets at RPE 9, the week
Yes.
before a deload.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Than you are doing it week 1 of the new training block.
Right. And that's what I tell my athletes too. It's like, hey, like if you are going to overshoot, don't overshoot week 1. Wait till week 3 to overshoot, because week 3, we can afford to overshoot a little bit there. That's not as detrimental to your training as if you were to do it in week 1.
Right. And an RPE 9 on week 1 might be 30 pounds less than an RPE 9 on week 3.
Exactly.
Just because you got to build into that comfort.
And that's taking away that overall training volume that we're trying to accumulate.
Exactly.
Not just weeks, but years during your training life. Right. Yeah.
So with everything we're talking about here, I think we can all kind of see maybe some of the problems that come in with like a pure percentage-based program.
Yes. Yeah.
In that if you are walking in and it's just like, well, here's everything's written out for me. Here's the weight, here's the reps, here's the sets, and you just go and do it regardless of how you feel that day. Like how do you manage that? How do you handle that for these bad days? And how, because I work with a lot of people who don't have a coach. They're on, they found that template online. They're kind of rolling with it,
Wendler 531, baby.
Yeah. Well, so at least with Wendler's though, it has the AMRAPs.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is a form of auto regulation of itself.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So with a lot of my people who aren't necessarily too good with RPE yet, we implement instead of a top set determined by RPE, they'll do a top set determined by AMRAP. So the load is kind of fixed for them. Yep. But then we say, all right, but stop that first, whenever it first starts to feel like it slows down, or that first grind, that's where you stop, because that's probably an RPE 7 to 8.
Right.
And so we kind of get them feeling it out that way, and then the load can kind of adjust off of that. So that kind of gets them in the right spot. But another thing we can do is, if you work on more of a percentage-based program, is to use what we call kind of a load zone. So if your program says 75%, that should really be like 70 to 80%.
Right.
And you have a range there, to where if you're coming in feeling kind of a bad day, like you're totally on a tier 3 warm-up kind of thing today, it's probably a 70% day.
Yeah.
Versus you're walking in, you're feeling alive, then 80% might be there that day.
Absolutely.
And those loads aren't so drastically different that it's going to give you a different training effect.
Right. And that's one thing. One thing too is again, kind of touching back on the mental aspect of training, is there's times if you have a strictly percentage-based program, and I would always do this, the night before, I'm freaking dreading, I have to hit what tomorrow? Are you serious? And then
we've all been there.
Yeah, and then you go into the gym, and like you said, maybe it's just not there that day. And then you're warming up, and you're like, fuck, man, I don't know if I got this. And then you don't have it, and then you feel like the whole training was a failure, and then you get down on yourself, and you're mentally kind of in the dumps a little bit, and you're like, dang, my training isn't going good. And then that can perpetuate into kind of ruining your block, if that's because if you're always kind of pushing, and then, I mean, your confidence can go out the window, and it can really affect everything.
Yeah, so I have to be the flip side of this, though. So being a weightlifter, I go based off of numbers, sets. I have the number in my head of I have to hit this today type situation. Now each day, one day it's a little more intense, the next day it's a little easier. Volume is kind of interspersed, and I do go through training blocks. But sometimes that can be the most motivating thing, because I don't.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because I don't want. It's
kind of like
feeling.
A sink or swim type.
Exactly. Where if I know, okay, I have to hit a 242 snatch today, I have to hit it. Or at least today, if I miss it once, I'm gonna take another crack at it. And if I don't get it, fine, it was a bad day.
Right. And the thing is too, I feel like you can kind of swing that with weightlifting, because the failures aren't as detrimental on your training as it is in powerlifting.
Yeah, fatigue management is a little bit easier with weightlifting, because there's a method where you could almost max out 2-3 times a week and still be okay if you don't do it for a very long time. Where with powerlifting, if you max out, you're done for a few weeks.
Oh my god!
Yeah, exactly. So
and there's also there's a difference between seeing that 242 there and saying, oh, I have to hit that today.
Yeah.
5 weeks out from a meet versus 6 months out from a meet.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
And then having the wherewithal to understand, because you obviously know what you're doing, and you can be like, again, you can auto-regulate yourself.
Right.
If you realize that's really not there, then you're like, okay, well, I need to take it down a notch.
Exactly. And that comes from all the years where I just kept banging my head against the wall.
Yeah.
But also something with weightlifting is technique, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the platform, I have to be comfortable lifting those numbers because a 242 snatch is different than a 220 in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that I have to practice. But I do want to kind of shift gears a little bit. So we've talked about the training aspect, and I'm sure you agree. Nutrition plays a huge role in how fatigued you are, how well you recover, what an RPE 8 kind of feels like. So let's how do you deal with athletes and their nutrition? Because I'm assuming you talk about it.
Yeah. I think you have to make sure the priorities are set first.
Mm-hmm.
You know, make sure that somebody has their basic foundation down before you try and implement a lot of performance enhancement type stuff.
Right.
So at the very basic level, are you drinking enough water?
Mm-hmm.
Are you hydrated going into training? That should be, I think, the first thing that we need to ask.
Yeah.
Because like we know people can train fasted. You know, we know people can train fed.
Yep.
So whether you've had pre-workout meal or whatever, whatever, you know, might swing either way. But we all kind of don't feel too good dehydrated.
Right.
Yeah.
And we know dehydration will kind of cut strength levels. So that's the first thing. Then looking at it from just that global scale, are you getting enough calories to feed your goals?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of us in the competitive world are going to have weight class restrictions.
Yep.
So, you know, if you don't want to have to do a hard cut to get into a weight class, then you probably shouldn't be packing on a bunch of weight in your off season either. You should make it more gradual.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, also on the flip side of that, like, are you under eating? Are you not getting enough in? Because if you're just if you're hard dieting right now, you're going to be more fatigued.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So, obviously that's going to affect your training.
Right.
And, that's huge too.
Go for it.
I have an athlete who is competing in Bench Worlds this next week, and she came up and we hit her openers on Saturday as well. And she kind of had a tough time with just like her warm-ups weren't moving like she wanted. And then, I mean, she proceeded to tell me like, hey, you know, I've been kind of crash dieting this last week because I need to get down my weight class. I'm like, okay, well, of course your training session isn't going to be as good.
Yeah.
You know, like you just have to take that in consideration. And that's one thing that just adds another aspect into that whole peak phase is like diet, what you're doing with your calories, because your fatigue level is so effing high that if you are also you're training that hard and then your calories are low, I mean, that's a tough place to be in, but that's a place that we find ourselves in like all the time. Yeah.
And for some people,
you know, the more variables you're having to kind of manage
Right.
all the time, the harder this gets.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's one of those things to where, I mean, we can say that about training. Like I know like Mike Teixeira's like emerging strategies approach right now. It's like manipulate the smallest amount of variables as possible. That way you know it actually works. And I kind of agree in that the more stuff you can hold steady, the more you know that the changes you made actually did something.
Right.
So if someone isn't consistent with their nutrition and it's all over the place, well, how do you know that fatigue is actually from their training load?
Right. Yeah.
I don't.
Right.
If they're sporadic with their sleep, I don't know if that fatigue is actually from their training load. Am I dosing them with too much volume? Am I dosing them with not enough volume?
Exactly.
I don't know.
Right.
So it makes the job of the coach so much harder if those variables aren't taken into consideration. I mean, it's just like saying like, oh, well, that was an RPE 9, but your technique went to shit 4 reps ago.
Right.
It's like,
and was it a 9 because you only had 4 hours of sleep?
9?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So we have to try and hold as many variables as steady as possible. So nutrition first, or hydration first is the easiest one.
Yep.
Global level calories, you know, then getting into more so like the thing that's going to help you recover the most. Make sure you get adequate protein for strength training, right? So protein levels, whatever the general recommendations are out there, 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound seems to be the general recommendation, depending on what your caloric level looks like. You know, and then I think beyond that, you can start to get more into the nitty gritty of it if someone is kind of good with that,
Right.
where
Capable of that.
Right.
Yeah. and obviously like vitamins, nutrients don't have a completely crap diet.
Right.
Like eat some whole foods, please.
You mean I can't just have donuts and protein shakes to get all of these numbers? Oh,
Yeah, you go to
calories and
yeah.
protein, man.
Yeah, that's all that counts.
Well,
That's all
you'll
that
get
counts.
plenty of that backstage at the powerlifting meet.
Oh
That's
my
all there
gosh,
is.
the amount of
It's
donuts I saw
donut.
yesterday was insane.
Oh yeah.
I was like, you just weighed in. Now you're gonna put all this crap in your system.
Oh, Sour Patch Kids are like the #1 thing at a powerlifting
Oh,
meet.
yeah.
Yeah. How
Yeah.
are you supposed
Yeah.
to snatch anything if you have
Like-
4 donuts like a rock in your stomach? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like I can't. I don't even do monsters before training anymore
Yeah.
because they feel like they bloat me up so much that my like my
belt,
belt just
yeah.
doesn't fit right.
Yeah.
There's only one
So,
thing
like,
that I
I've
will
gone to coffee
hardline.
instead.
There's only one thing I will hardline before I do a big lift session, and Cole gives me shit about it constantly because I'm on a cut right now because I really want to. I'm obviously the 85 plus category, so I'd really like to help my IPF numbers and kick my my weight down. And I'm like, dude, I'm already down like 8 pounds from like Saturday's meet. I know it's water weight, but still, he goes, no, maybe it's because you're not mainlining hard shell tacos every other day.
Hard shelled tacos.
Like, seriously, like I have my best lift sessions after I eat hard shell tacos.
and
I don't know
here-
what
What
it
did we say
is.
about rituals?
Salt.
Yeah.
It's probably the salt. For
Well,
real.
here's what she was doing too: is she was justifying having a bullshit diet. She's like, I have a meet this weekend, so I need to get as many calories in as possible. She's just crushing.
You know,
through
CT
that.
Fletcher
Right.
used to have McDonald's every day, and what do
Yeah.
you have? 4 Big Macs and fries for lunch every day.
If it makes
he
you-
had 2 heart attacks. Okay.
Well, if it makes you feel better, listen, I already understand how my body works. Like the reason it's hard shell tacos is because there's no gluten. I'm not dealing with it. Corn is fine. Corn doesn't bloat
You're
me.
just justifying all
I
of this.
totally
right now,
love
and
hard
it's-
shell tacos. Yeah, I would literally go to the mattresses for, as they say in The Godfather, for hard shell tacos. But
Oh,
Just
gosh.
call it. Just,
But I can't
just
eat 'em
say
now.
Discretionary calorie allotment.
Yeah,
That's
there you go.
Calories.
There you go.
Yes.
And be whatever
yes.
you want. You know.
But yeah,
And-
eat a
but-
few vegetables, have a little bit of fruit, put some nutrients in your
Yeah.
body, right?
Yeah.
Do the stuff you know you're supposed to do.
Right.
Right. Be an adult about
Yeah,
it.
seriously.
I
Yeah.
totally
is
feel like I
the-
just got put in timeout.
Brooke, go put
No,
your
as
nose
I
in the
said,
corner.
Discretionary calorie allotment, right? It's. I mean, I don't know how many.
Oh.
I don't know how many tacos we're having here. How many we're talking prior to
It's usually
training.
4.
In a
Oh.
4
sitting.
hard shell tacos in a single sit. And then little, that's it though. Like wham, 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 all 4 of them. And I have the best lift sessions of my life. Like it's crazy.
Maybe you just need
It's
more
gotta be the
salt.
sodium. It's gotta be the
You probably
sodium.
don't get enough salt in your life, and those hard shell tacos are giving it to you. And the shitty ass meat that's probably in it
You
too.
know, all I have
It
to
has
say is,
gravel in it.
you know, it's like Marie Kondo. Like I
Chalk.
smell them and they give me joy. So, so I figure we keep them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So-
So once you're past that, then we can, you say like, oh, well, this person performs better on higher carbs. This person performs
Yep.
better on higher fats. This
Right.
person performs better fasted. This person performs better. What yada yada yada. That's as far as I take it because I'm
Okay.
not a nutritionist,
Right,
not a
right.
dietitian. So if it's the other things like intolerances or allergies or anything like that, they need to go speak to somebody
Yes.
professionally about that.
Do you recommend any sort of supplements like omegas or vitamin Ds or anything like that, or you just kind of say go to a nutritionalist?
Well, I would.
How about
like
this?
to
I'll
say
ask
go
this
to a
question:
nutritionist for
what do
everybody.
you give yourself? Because you can talk about what you take all you want.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a minimalist by heart. So I'm not like a multivitamin kind of guy because
Okay.
I get a pretty whole food diet. But creatine,
Mhm.
I use a protein supplement just to help get the numbers in,
Yep.
and a fish oil.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Like
Well, I think
now I live in Florida, so vitamin D is not exactly a big deal.
up here in the Great
um,
White North,
versus
we need to.
You live,
Yeah.
It
above.
snowed on Tuesday.
Yeah,
okay.
it snowed on Tuesday.
It snowed
my
on
God.
Tuesday. So, yeah. Bullshit.
probably
okay.
get-
I've
probably
been taking my vitamin D every day now.
Yep.
So fuck this snow.
No, but I think kind of what you described there is just, I mean, as long as you're hitting your bases, then you can then go from there as far as fine tuning things like
Right.
that. But it's hard to, like when people talk about carb cycling and all this stuff, and they don't even,
They don't even understand the science behind it, but they know, oh, I'm going to
right
cut my carbs.
or they
and-
don't get their protein allotment for the day. or
Why
they
aren't I
don't-
performing better while I'm carb cycling? Come
Right.
on.
It's because you just get those those main staples of what you need,
Mhm.
and then go from there.
Mm-hmm.
So, we talk about like holding those variables steady.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's really just trying to hold recovery
Mhm.
and like have a good baseline recovery, knowing, okay, I recovered this well between training sessions. So therefore, if I'm not performing well, it's probably due to accumulation of fatigue due to load.
Yes.
So if you really want to hone in on those things, it's all the basic stuff you need to do. The
Mhm.
stuff that's going to affect recovery and affect how you feel day to day is sleep.
Mhm.
Make sure you get enough sleep, hydration, nutrition, manage your psychological stress.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't be totally stressed out.
Yeah.
Consistency is
Listen,
huge.
Manage
That entire
Manage
list
those
just
things
triggered me
consistently, man.
personally inside. I want you to know the entire list you just said. I feel triggered.
Calm the hell down.
Oh, you guys,
Psychological stress.
I feel seen.
I feel seen.
So those are the things that'll actually affect you and could actually like maybe drag your recovery down if you don't manage those.
Yes.
Then if you want to say, all right, I want to go get a massage, or I want to do an ice bath, or I want to do foam rolling or chiropractic adjustments or whatever else on top of that, realize that the lack of those things is not going to make your recovery worse.
Yes.
But they might make you feel better because you like them.
Right.
And so, but make sure you take care of the big things first,
Yeah.
and don't use the other stuff as like a Band-Aid to not get your sleep at night.
Right. Yeah, I think something that I really appreciate about you is you strike me as the type that tries to work himself out of a job. And I like that.
Yeah.
Where, a lot of people around here do chiropractic as a means where you need to come twice a week for the rest of your life type situation where
Sickening.
Yeah, I like it where you're the minimal effective dose type guy. It's very, very refreshing and a breath of fresh air for sure.
Yeah.
Because, so to kind of piggyback off of what you were just saying, so I've experimented with 6 weeks of salt baths and 6 weeks of cryo and 6 weeks of massage, and unless I'm going to consistently do those, I'm not going to get the 1%, 2% bonus out of it. Where, again, so this training phase, I kind of took some of that out just so I have a base where I know, hey, when I'm only caring about sleeping, nutrition, water, how much caffeine I'm taking in, and things like that, I know this is minimally what I need from my training.
You took some of those variables out so you can really see what is affecting
Exactly. And now going into it, I have 3 weeks of different things because all I've been doing is weightlifting for 18 months straight now. And it's time to just have a very general phase again.
GPP, man.
Yeah, some GPP. So during this phase, now I can really look at the last 18 months of training and say, okay, now what can I do? What variables do I want to manipulate so I kind of know where it's going to go? Do I need more squat volume? Do I need to clean more? Whatever.
Yeah.
And
we have some athletes that I have to try and pull back on all their recovery modalities a little bit too, because it can actually like long term have a bit of a detrimental effect on them, in that the easy one to pick on is the foam roller, but it could be anything.
Ice baths.
Salt
are a
baths,
big one.
yeah, ice baths, anything. In that you can get so used to how you feel having those things that then you have to train on the road, or you have a competition that's not at home, or you have something and you don't have access to those things, and it actually causes a decrease in your performance, or like psychologically, more than physically you're probably still good, but psychologically you don't feel ready to do what you need to do because you don't have access to your modality that you've kind of become dependent on. So I would rather somebody use those things kind of as a, hey, you know what? I really want to perform my absolute best today. So I'm going to do that.
Yes.
Because like I'm going to go get that thing because I really want to do really well on this next session, or I'm testing on this next week or whatever. So I'm going to do that. But it's not something I would recommend using every single day throughout your entire training, as a recovery modality.
But Jake, I gotta keep this inflammation down. Oh my gosh, all this inflammation I'm causing. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of like a comfort blanket some people have, where that foam roller is literally attached to their hip. So I was just at a meet yesterday, and I saw we're gonna bring it back to the warm up thing. some of the people that were warming up, it seemed like they were a zombie, where I go from this foam roller to this, to that stretch, to this mobility, to blah, 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 blah. Now I'm touching the bar 40 minutes later, and it's become such a habit and routine. There's no way it's benefiting them anymore. So how do you pull an athlete out of that?
I think it's just like a routine thing, and you just kind of have to break them.
But how do you? Because obviously these people have been doing this routine for at least a year.
Yeah,
it's just so ingrained where it's, again, it's a zombie. They're not even trying to foam roll to actually improve their range of motion or anything. They're just foam rolling to do it because they've done it every day for the last year.
Well, I think, doesn't that come onto a case-by-case scenario? Like we were talking about how you pick those one or two things that seem to work for you and they're helping you, and you see what's going to help. Like, for example, for me, I do have to foam roll and I do my certain glute activation things and stuff like that. However, I have noticed that like with my foam rolling, it changes. I'm not just rolling out my quads and being done with it every time. Like sometimes I have to, like if I know I'm feeling some tightness in my my hip flexors, or maybe my ITs are giving me a little extra, not so love, then I do that. I know what you're talking about though, whereas basically you can tell they're just doing the same basic foam rolling that they probably saw somewhere else, and they're just doing it to do it.
Or they just read The Supple Leopard, and now they're trying everything on every page.
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
They
Right.
do all 300 pages
We
of
all
mobility.
went through that phase.
Yeah.
Well, and this,
Yeah.
I think, maybe wouldn't this be pushed more on the coach's responsibility if they're coached to be like, hey, I need to pay attention to your working sets, but I should be paying attention to how you are warming up.
Mm-hmm.
And am I, like you being the coach being the outside eye looking in, would have the ability to say, are we seeing some improvement with what we're doing as that warm up? I mean, would that be something that's agreeable or no? Or
Yeah, I think it's agreeable. I mean, I think that, and you also don't try and make drastic changes for people. It's something that you would pull maybe one thing out at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So talking about the glute routine from earlier, right? Maybe you don't go from 4 exercises to just the bar. Maybe you say, all right, let's go and do what do you feel? This is gonna be a conversation between me and you. What do you feel are the 2 that give you the most bang for your buck?
Mhm.
Right.
And what 2 do you feel are kind of the least bang for your buck?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, I think that, side steps and kickbacks are the 2 best ones. Or what are the 4 exercises that you're doing?
the 4 that
By the
I'm
way.
doing, I do a foot together banded hip thrust where I pull my knees out, so my heels are together. I'll switch it out to a wide stance hip thrust. I then turn them each side, and what I'll do is laying flat on my side, I actually do, it's a cool little stretch I do for the outside of my hip, where basically together I will lift my feet. I look like I'm kind of doing like a seal, a little bit on each side. And then the last one I do is kind of like a frog, except for I make sure that I have my feet flexed, almost like they would be like on the floor with a squat. So I will, this is just what I do before I do my squats. This is the 4 movements that I do. And then what I will do with foam roll in general before sets, because hip mobility and tightness, that's where my knee pain is coming from, is I have just ridiculously tight legs and hamstrings and all this crap. So for example, if I'm on set 3 of warm-ups for squats and I'm noticing that I'm getting a ping of kind of a pull pain in a certain part of my knee, I know that I can attack that tight sector a little bit in between my sets, and the pain goes away almost immediately. So I'm noticing a really good change in the way my soft tissues are allowing me to get through these movements as I'm working them throughout, instead of just doing hey, I'm just gonna roll my calves quick, and I'm just gonna roll my ITs quick, I'm gonna run into it. So mine has been very
Reactionary instead of
I've had to really listen to my body.
But I also believe you put a slingshot around your knees, right?
I do. I
So
put a
that's
slingshot.
also a hip
It's
circle.
banded.
Yeah, hip
Yep.
circle, and you do some laps and you do some squats. So you're doing quite a few things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've also noticed that there's been days where I've been in a hurry and I haven't done certain things. And I've noticed that when I don't do the frog, I still am okay getting down to my mobility.
there you go.
So there was one
So
there
there's
that
the
I'm
first
like,
one you're probably going to
Yep.
cut out.
And then
Right.
my question would be, could you even just put the hip circle on and get through it now that you can actually get depth already?
right.
Because for me,
Right.
that's basically all I do. So I basically do crossover symmetry for my shoulders just to make sure that they're healthy. And then a minute with that hip circle, I'll do like a lap facing one way, a couple squats, and then I'm in it. Because that's enough for
Well,
me.
and I've noticed the monster walks with the hip circle don't do as much for me. I think
Okay.
sometimes it's just in a busy gym, it's a way for me to get my head in the space again.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I was doing the the banded hip thrusts, those are the ones that light my glutes on fire like crazy, especially that outside of the glute.
Yep.
And that lower portion of my glute gets a really good kick to it. And those ones seem to to really help me activate things as I'm coming out of the hole much better than monster walks would and things like that. I'm pretty strong in my legs. And so there seems to be something when I'm dealing with having those knees already bent and I'm working those glutes that I seem to have, from what I can feel, a better response out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the hip thrust is going to hit the glute max a lot more than the side steps are going to be much more glute me, glute min. So depending on what you feel works best for you. So obviously we have 2 hip thrust variations in there. Which one of those do you feel is more beneficial to you if you had to pick one? Like if you were really short on time and you only got one of them to do that day because you had to be out of there pretty quick, which one would you do?
It would be the one with the feet together. And as I'm thrusting up, I'm pressing those knees out.
Cool. So that's probably where I would go with it. If we were to say we're going to make that gradual transition to that kind of tier 1 warm up where it's just the bar, we're going to probably get rid of the wide stance hip thrust and the frog first because she sees more benefit probably out of the other 2. And so we start there, and maybe because we're cutting out one hip thrust, maybe we just go 1.5 times the volume on the other one to start, right? Just to give her a little bit of the feel, a bit more of it.
Yeah.
And so we've cut out an exercise, just kind of increased dosage with the other one. Then we get her into the bar, let her do her foam rolling in between or whatever, and see how things go there. And then we'll kind of repeat that process. Okay, well, how are you feeling here? Let's cut out this one. Maybe instead of you really like those hip thrusts, cool, do it for the rest of your life if you want to.
Right.
Like it's going to take 30 seconds of your day, and no one's training ever like got worse because they warmed up for 5 minutes.
Right. And here's the thing too, is like if you cut those 2 out and then get under the bar
for one more set,
but you get under the bar and you do a couple sets and you're like, hey, I'm still not really, I don't feel ready, and then you just go back and do the other 2 then, and then you get to a point where you don't need them.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the way you approach it, Jake, because you're giving the power back to the athlete, where even though you're the one that has the information and you're the one that's actually coaching them, you're bringing yourself on their level and allowing them to kind of take over. And I really like that, because rather than just saying, I want you to take these away, you ask them, which ones do you want to take away? And again, that's huge to me, because me as well, I always want the athlete to be able to do it themselves eventually.
Yeah. Well, I think they're going to stick to it better too if they feel like it was a decision that they made.
Exactly.
And not just getting told what to do.
It should be a collaborative decision.
Yes.
They should not be told what to do.
Yeah, you're a team. You're not just their leader.
Yeah.
Well, and as someone I'm almost a master's lifter. This next year I'll be 40. And
holy shit!
You guys need to just shut up, okay? I am your gym mom. Leave me alone. Okay, no, but for reals, I've noticed as someone who is a super heavyweight lifter too, as I get better at my lifts, as my fitness level increases, my body is changing a lot.
Yes.
And so to be able to say, hey, I cannot feel bad about taking away and becoming more confident with less warm up for my certain issues. As those things get a little bit better, let's be real, in about 6 months, there's going to be another part of my body that maybe is going to be going, hey, wow, this is new. I'm actually working this a little bit more. Or as that composition changes, especially with weight loss, if you're dealing with fat loss, and I'm notoriously known for the more weight I lose, the less and less and less knock-kneed I am. I'm not very as much anymore as I used to be, but the way I stand and the way that, even my back and my SI joint will adjust and whatnot, all starts to change. So to know that I don't have to have a constant 30-minute warm-up, I have room to add other parts if they're needed later, without winding up being the woman who spends an hour and a half in the gym on a foam roller and maybe is lucky if I get half hour to squat.
Yeah. So I have
and I think this is easy. I think it's easier to make that, like, to have that conversation with somebody who maybe isn't 20 years old. Like whenever, like, if you're 23, like you have, like, what do you have to do other than be in the gym?
Exactly.
Like it's the big part of your day, versus you talk to somebody who's 35 and, wants to spend some time with their kids when they get home and they have a job they're going to. It's a little bit easier to have that conversation and say, hey, let's go and, maybe try and pull this down so you have a little bit more time. You can get out of the gym a bit earlier this week.
Yeah, that's huge. And that's one thing too, is like for some of my athletes who, like, they don't have a choice. They have only this set amount of time. So it's like, okay, well, we got to do the things that's going to affect you the most? We need the most bang for our buck here because you only have this much time allotted towards training. And and then maybe there's some people who, because of their circumstances, they can only afford to get six hours a night of sleep. So then it's like, okay, well, now we know we can't really necessarily push the volume and push your fatigue as far because you're not going to have the amount of time to recover that another person might have. So there's all these different factors that as a coach, but also just as an athlete, if you don't have a coach, that you need to take into consideration when training, when warming up, when doing all this other stuff.
So before we let you go, because we've taken quite a bit of your time already, I've had a question in my brain this whole time. So I have a couple athletes that are full-time, year-round baseball players. Okay. And one of them has a father that refuses to let their kid have an off season. How do you recommend so year-round baseball, for people who don't know, in the winter, they'll play 2 games a week, right? And they never get a chance to actually sit down and relax. This kid in particular, sometimes he pitches and sometimes he plays shortstop. How do we make sure he stays healthy before he gets hurt? I guess, like, how do we even approach that? Because the father refuses to let the kid have an off season.
So it's such a tough situation to navigate. It really is. And so we have to, like, physiologically, you have to think of everything from a systemic fatigue level in that if he's playing year-round ball, that's the most important thing. That obviously the training stress is not going to be, it's not within anyone's control there. So we have to kind of first off, we have to control what we can control, which is you're going to pull his training that you are controlling down to a minimum effective dose.
Once or twice a week.
Right. So if we think about like maximum recoverable volume is where you're going to get the most results, weekly progress, all this. Minimum effective dose is, hey, we might make some monthly progress. Maybe every 6 weeks we see some progress. Like, I'm pulling you down to that level. Because I at least don't want you getting worse. And I don't want to stress you more so than what you're already doing. You know, obviously we would love for him to get a break. Like, you need a break. And
or just different.
I would actually, something different.
A different sport for 3 months, please. Do sprinting or something. Come on.
It's a lot of it comes from the parent just thinking, okay, well, more is better, more practice is better. You know, he'll get rusty if he doesn't, do it. So I think you have to bring the parent into it a little bit, if possible, like into the decision process, which is super tough to do. But so we've had to navigate this a little bit to where if an athlete feels better, like they literally, like they feel better, they don't ache, whatever, on a week that it was a super light week, and we track their training loads. Then, we can show that to the parent, say, look here, here's the data, here's the numbers, which anyone who wants to track that, if you look up the session RPE scale, it's the Borg CR10 scale. You just ask the athlete at the end of the training session, how hard was that today? And you ask them maybe like 10 to 30 minutes after the session, just so like the last thing they did doesn't impact how they felt. They'll rate it, and then you multiply whatever number you get there by the minutes that they played. So the duration of the session. And that gives you a load. So that's really what they use in a lot of the injury prevention literature. That's the metric they use. And so if you look at that and you see like, okay, well, his average weekly load is at 2,000. On a week that he's at 1,250, he felt like really good. And so you can show that kind of hard data to the parent, and that can help. And where you can really start to get the parent involved there is say, all right, because this is probably a type A parent, right? This isn't some
very much. And this man, he spent $30,000 to send him to Accelerate last year. Anyway,
so probably a type A parent. So you get him in on it. Make him the one who's asking, "Hey, how'd that feel today?"
Get him involved in the numbers and the load,
tracking the minutes. Because he's gonna keep that data. he wants to be more invested.
Exactly. That's a
Wants
great
to
way.
be involved. So have him be the one to track that data, and you take it off the kid,
Mhm.
and you just say, all right, here's the data. And so then the two of you can then come together, and you can maybe set up a meeting with the parent and say, hey, I want to see the data from this week. What's he doing? And from there, you now have an avenue to start talking, to say, all right, so he feels better. Seems to feel better whenever he's here, and you can have him you can have him rate his recovery as well with the perceived recovery status scale, which is just another 0 to 10 scale.
Right.
You ask him at the beginning of the session, how do you feel today?
Yep.
So you can start to make some correlations there, and then you can start to talk to the parent of, I really think that he could really benefit long term and coming into his next season if we could really put some strength and mass on him, or we could really work on some power development. But I need that load that's sitting currently at a 2,000. I need about 1,000 points to myself,
right,
to be able to work with, because you see where his recovery is already sitting around at 2. Once he's up to 2,000, I can't throw more load on top of that. I can't work with that. So if you could give me 1,000 points to play with, which is going to look like us pushing. That's going to look like us pushing, 200 minutes. So whatever that comes out to, about 3 hours. Give me 3 hours a week to push him at this intensity level, right? And he just has to back off he's going to have to back off from playing for that duration of time, so that I can get my work in with him, and it's working within the ability that he currently has. But so you kind of start with that training load number, figure out what his current ability is, bring the parent into the whole decision process, and say, currently I can only push him this hard because this is all he's got. I would love to be able to push this number up to improve upon his physical abilities, but I'm not going to do that if
it puts him at risk for injury.
Exactly.
Yeah, because our first goal is do no harm.
That approach is going to work with this man.
What's frustrating too, as a strength coach who has worked with high school athletes, it's like, as a strength coach, you always get the short end of the stick.
Always.
Because their sport takes precedent, right? So like, you're kind of just like, there's times when someone walks in and, like, especially during the summer, they're like, oh, this morning I had basketball and then I went to baseball for 3 hours and then I had to volunteer at church and now I'm here. It's like, well, you should be home eating and sleeping.
Right,
so
exactly.
we're just gonna do some light recovery work, because anything that I throw at you, you're not gonna see the benefits of it anyway. So
and I wish I could get a hold of all of the parents that I'll be training their kids this summer and say, do you want your kid to get faster, to get stronger, or to practice baseball?
Right.
What do you want? Do they need to practice baseball because they can't throw the ball very well, they can't hit the ball, maybe they're not doing the plays appropriately? Or did their season suffer last year because they couldn't hit the ball far enough, they couldn't get to the base fast enough, or they couldn't react fast enough? What was their problem? I wish I could do that with all of them.
You can, though. I think here's where I think you can. You come up with a questionnaire.
Yeah.
Because these parents
send it out to all the parents.
So these parents are involved. These parents,
they want the best for their kid. Yeah, they want their kid to be the best as possible. So
this is an entry question, a new season or end of season questionnaire for every parent that you work with their kids. And what do you feel was that limited your kid's performance over this last year? Was it skill, or was it capacity to perform? Meaning, and you phrase it as like, was it because they couldn't throw hard enough? Was it because they couldn't hit the ball hard enough? Or was it because they just couldn't hit the ball?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that should then open up an avenue for you to be able to have this conversation of, well, if they couldn't hit the ball hard enough, they probably need, like, they have the hand-eye coordination for it. They're doing it. Just swinging more probably isn't going to make them hit the ball further. They probably need to, but I really think they benefit from putting on 5-6 pounds and getting a little bit stronger.
Right.
So I think that in the best interest of improving their performance, because that's really what you want, right?
Yes.
You want their performance to go up, and you've already put them into this kind of funnel towards the avenue you want it to go. Is by starting with the questions, they've then, just like we said, what do you feel you're getting the least bang for your buck from, right? Well, what do you feel is limiting the child's performance here?
Yeah.
Right. And then it's kind of their decision.
Right.
They're the ones telling you what needs to actually happen.
And
you're
then
just relaying the message
Right.
to them.
And then that gives you ammo to come back
Right.
at them if like 4 weeks down the road you're like, hey, you said you wanted this, but you're pushing your kid into doing all this other things.
these other
I can't do
camps
what you want me to do.
If their kid's already signed up
and
for a
maybe-
camp, you almost have to tell them now when they're at the camp, they should only go hard, one of those 3 days because I need that 1,000 points.
Right.
I like that.
It might be advantageous too to send that as a parent questionnaire, but then when you have the kids in front of you, give them a very similar test because that will also give you a litmus test of, do we just have a hyperactive parent here? Or do we really have a problem? Do we have a different issue with this athlete? Like, maybe they do need to get stronger and faster, but maybe their confidence level with the game itself isn't where it needs to be. And that might be able to help you kind of find that happy medium as well. Because
we already do athlete questionnaires. It's just parent questionnaires.
Well, do you have,
I like that.
and do you have if you have a relationship with the coach,
Yes.
have the coach fill one out because they probably trust the coach. Like they paid all that money to send him to that league.
Yeah,
right?
the coach says they need to run faster.
Well, and he's going to have a more
This is what the
unbiased
coach said
opinion.
was their limiting factor.
Exactly.
Well, because he wants to win,
The coach is saying it's this.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if the coach is saying it's because of this, well, here's the avenue we need to take in order to, improve upon this physical quality, and that's where we need to take it. So in the interest of long-term development of your child, then here's where we need to go with it. And so you're not telling them, because they don't want to hear your kid needs to rest.
Right.
That doesn't work. They don't need to hear that. So what you're going to have to do is you have to work around that and get the child the rest that they need. And you're going to have to kind of
play
work
to their
the
ego
system a bit to get them there. Yeah.
And I think I can get in touch with a lot of the other summer camp coaches too.
Yeah.
And if I can sit down and again with a football player or something, and if the underlying factor is they need to be faster, bigger, whatever, then I can even work with that coach and say, hey, you can't really push them that hard because I need those points too.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I like referencing it in points as well. Not energy level, but points.
It's more
I
conceptualized.
Like it is.
And you just relate the points back to their work capacity.
Exactly. Yeah. But the parents don't need to know that.
Yeah.
The points are their work capacity. If you want them to be able to handle more, then you're going to have to gradually dose that up.
Yeah.
And so that's where something like the acute to chronic workload ratio can come in.
Yes. Yeah.
Where you start to divide their workload this week by what they've done over the last 4 and say, well, you're right. So I want to dose this chronic load up by about 10% per week. But I can't get there if they're consistently sitting at a 2 out of 10 recovery level.
Right.
So we're going to have to draw them back, build them up. And, I think the coaches are going to get that a lot more than the parents, because the coaches are invested, but they're not invested on that same personal level as like, this is my child.
Yes.
The coach is invested on the team. The coach is invested in his athletes, the coach is invested in the team, but they're not invested in that same level as the parent.
I love this guy.
Yeah. Well, sweet. Let's bring this sucker in for a landing. I do want to say for all the listeners out there, Jake has a phenomenal Instagram page.
Yeah.
It's almost like a library. So you can go on his page and he has the text is big enough where you can look at all the squares at the same time. You don't need to go one by one, and literally look at his page, find whatever issue you're having. He has a phenomenal short little video. It's concise. You get what you need out of it, and then the captions are always awesome. So look at his Instagram. It has helped me a lot. It has helped Brooke a lot. So what's your handle again? It's dr.jacob.harden.
Dr.jacob.harden.
Awesome.
Well, don't forget the @@ symbol.
And the @
Don't forget.
I don't know that you have to type that in the search bar.
Thank you so much for Skyping us on Mother's Day, Jake.
Yeah.
I have a list of questions and we answered 2. So if we can ever have you back, we will gladly.
Absolutely, guys.
We will gladly have you back.
Yeah. So whenever they reached out and everything, and this is something I wanted to do because I love talking this kind of stuff.
Yes.
It's really fun. It's fun to get into the strength sports sides of things, to the strength conditioning side of things. Like I said, I love being on podcasts and diving into the context behind a lot of this stuff. There's only so much we could put out on Instagram and stuff, but this is where we can have some good conversations. So if you guys ever want to do it again, just let me know. I'm always down to do it.
And let us know.
Yeah.
If you ever have a wild hair up your butt and I want to talk 3 hours about blah, we will listen to it.
We'll be your ears, man.
We'll be your ears for
Last
sure.
question
Sounds
is,
good.
are you, because I know you mentioned USAPL Raw Nationals before, are you planning on going to USAPL Raw Nationals
And do you
this
need
year?
a coach?
Do you need a coach? I was going to say, we're bringing the podcast there, so we'd love to see you in person.
Yeah.
And I owe you like 2 high fives and a hug for helping me with squat depth.
And a hard taco.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good. I don't know. I haven't had any plans to. I don't even know when is Raw Nationals and where is it?
It's
this
usually
year?
the second week in October, and then it's in Chicago area. I don't think it's actually Chicago, but I think it's a suburb of
It's
Chicago.
like Lombard or something like that.
Yeah.
Lombard, Illinois. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll take my
It's
hind
cold
don't
there. It's
know.
cold there in October. I'm sorry.
I would say I don't. I probably won't be there because I'm going to teach over in Australia for a week
man.
in October. So I'm taking my course over there for a little bit, but I'm probably not going to want to jump on a plane.
Right.
Yeah,
after
probably
that.
not.
So-
We just need to get your course to come to Minnesota is what we need to do.
For sure we do.
Got to get you booked up here.
I have a tough time up in the Midwest area.
Really?
Like
Really?
yeah. So the main thing is like we just need to find a host.
Yeah.
We just need a facility. We just basically need a facility to host us. And then we are more than happy to usually come up there because like I don't mind teaching. I mean, I don't mind teaching 10 people if that's who wants to show up.
So we're going to
have
fly them in. We're going to put them in a hotel.
I have some definite people that would
for
probably
sure.
be
Yep.
interested.
As
so.
do I. Absolutely.
Oh my
we should
gosh.
chat about
And
it.
we're having
Maybe
tacos if it
get up there.
happens.
Yeah,
And
for
we're
sure.
having
There we go.
tacos.
I'm kidding, I'm
Shut
kidding.
your mouth. Shut your
He'll be
mouth.
like, I did not order tacos on the catering, and I'll just be
Right.
sitting in the corner smiling. Meh.
That is
Is there anything else you want to plug before we get you off here, Jake?
So anyone who listens to a course wants to come out to a course, learn a little bit more about what I am talking about here, and get more into the injury side of all this, and kind of learn my approach to how I bring athletes back from injury. I teach a course called Prehab 101. We're going to be in Atlanta June 1st and 2nd. Then we're going over to Portland on the 7th and 8th, and then we'll finally be in New York City in July. So anybody who wants to come out and learn a little bit, then that's where we'll be.
Hell
Awesome.
yeah.
That's crazy because I know for a fact that we have a couple big friends of the podcast that are in Atlanta and in New York City. So
Yeah.
we'll try to send a couple your way for sure.
Cool. I appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jacob. You have a wonderful Mother's Day.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thanks.
We're out.
The Coaches Collaboration Podcast. What do you mean you haven't subscribed yet? What the hell are you waiting for? Come on, y'all. The Coaches Collaboration Podcast is brought to you by The Complete Athlete, providing world-class continuing education for fitness trainers, coaches, and gyms. Online at getcomplete.net.